Welcome to the Essential Element, the Elements of Education podcast. I'm Christian Page, and we're so grateful that you're here with us today. Thank you for tuning in. We know you could be anywhere else in the world right now, but you're choosing to spend your time with us, sharpening your tools. And my hope is that you also understand that the essential element to education is relationship and mentorship, and treating young people and families as humans before, right, we get into the space of understanding quantitative measures. So today, we're going to have a conversation with a teacher named Duncan. Duncan is a teacher at SAMI, and we understand that before we are educators, we're human beings. And so Duncan has experience playing sports, has really been impacted by the education system early on in his childhood, had teachers who came around him, who coalesced him into really caring about his community by showcasing and modeling what it looks like to care about him. Duncan is not your average civics teacher. He is an individual who cares about his students, cares about his community, cares about social issues, and really pushes students to think about not only how does this work in our discussions in class, but what does this look like for us to actually go out in our community and impact change. So our conversation with Duncan goes in a lot of different directions, but really focuses on how do we build relationship with students and how do we impact our community with the new knowledge that we have around civics and the process. So without further ado, is our conversation with Duncan.
Our school, we really believe in relationships, and that is emphasized through mentor group. And so I wholeheartedly believe in that.
What do they need? I have to be able to answer that question. And that takes a little bit of time. The biggest teacher, I think, is failure. The brain works in failure. And those failures are actually synapses rewiring themselves in your brain.
And think about where you want to be. Because when you find your place, you find your people, and our purpose is attached to people.
You know, when there's a phenomenal teacher, when there's a phenomenal educator, when there's a phenomenal mentor, one of the mistakes that we make is we make it look too easy. Like, everyone sees the shining moment on stage. No one sees, right, like the hard time spent. All right. Well, Duncan, grateful that we get the opportunity to sit down and have this conversation. But this is like my favorite kind of interview. And the reason being is because we haven't gotten a lot of time to know each other before, right? And I'm all for authentic discovery. I'm all for building relationships. And so I'm glad that we get to do this more in an organic fashion than, right? Like this idea of like, how do we perform for? So grateful that you're taking the time. Excited about getting the opportunity to meet you. And my first question for you, right, is, you know, really on this idea that like we're humans before we are educators or teachers, right? And so I'm curious about Duncan the human, right? So like what's been your journey in getting here to SAMI? Who are you? Yeah. Right? Like what's the story of Duncan?
Yeah, that's kind of tough because I talk to my students about code switching, and I always tell them that I am the least code switching person that you'll ever meet in your entire life. And I try and empathize with them and students that have to code switch a lot, because I've kind of always been the same person. So when I tell my people from high school old friends that I'm now a teacher, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, oh yeah, you liked school. And like, I wasn't the perfect student. I wasn't like a 4.0 student or anything, but like, I always enjoyed being in school. I always enjoyed learning. And so I think I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. It was more of a question of like when. And so did I want to do it when I was younger, in my 20s, like probably alongside with coaching sports, or did I want to do it like after another career, maybe in my 50s or 60s? But I kind of always knew I wanted to do it. And then after college, I tried a couple of different jobs. I wouldn't say I gave it like a total fair shot to work every industry or anything, but I was like, I don't like working in a job that I just get a paycheck. So I wanted to work someplace that I really felt like I was making a difference. And like every day I had a reason to go to work, that I knew I was impacting people and impacting the world in a positive way, and that's still a huge motivation for me. So yeah, that's a big part of it. And then my identity as an educator, as a person, I guess I love learning. You know, I'm like, my dad every night texts me the Final Jeopardy question. We're always like quizzing each other on that kind of stuff. So like, I just love, you know, knowledge and learning and that kind of stuff. And so I think that's just already a part of who I am. And so the teaching kind of comes naturally a little bit from that. Yeah.
Awesome. And so I'm hearing you say, right, like that you really enjoyed being in school, right? That you really enjoy the process of learning. And I'm curious of like what sparked that in you? What in the environment existed that made you want to keep coming back to school?
Yeah.
And then how do you create that for your students now?
Yeah, I think for me it was the teachers. I think I was really lucky. I had really amazing teachers that they didn't all teach the exact same way, but I don't ever remember having a teacher that that didn't care, that didn't want us to learn, that wasn't putting something together that was meaningful and challenging. And I just was really lucky. I felt like I had a really good school district that I went to. My mom was involved in the school. She would come and teach art history lessons, like to students, like as like to give the teachers a break. I now realize it was to give the teachers a break. Back then, I was like, Mom, you're not really an expert in this. I mean, she's like pretty good at it, but so yeah, I kind of felt like I always had that obligation to give that back because I was really lucky to have those teachers that cared about me so much. And then I loved like the feeling of being on a journey together. To me, I always played sports growing up. And I just loved like the building of a team, and I've always kind of seen like a classroom like that, and that like some people have certain strengths and we need to play to those strengths, other people have weaknesses and we need to work on those, and that as a team we're going to get to where we want to go, and so I always loved that momentum of school, and that there's like the end of a semester, the end of a school year, like I don't know, there's a sense of accomplishment, like with those people too, not just myself or not just with the teacher, but like with those students. So that's something I still definitely hold on to. Yeah.
Man, I love that metaphor. And like we could make the rest of this conversation about football, about sports, about things of that nature. But I love that idea of, right, like there are some things that we're already good at. There's some strengths that we bring to the table. There are things that we need to work on. And I love, right, like there are so many people who have said this before, but I really love the quote, like, you can only teach who you are.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm really curious about, for you, right, like when you were in the classroom or as you're in the classroom, what are things that you feel come naturally to you as strengths? And what are some things that like you've had to learn along the way, right? Like from novice teacher Duncan to right where you are now, like what are some of the things that you've had to pick up?
So I guess my strength, it's kind of a weird one, but like I'm a larger male teacher and I intimidate students by accident just by my presence, and I'll have students I've had in class for a month and I'm walking around the class all the time and they'll just all of a sudden be like, whoa, Mr. White, you're so tall. Like I'm like, sorry, I just am trying to come over here and help you with your assignment. But like, so just my physical presence, because of that, and I don't lean into it, I try and be aware of it and not be physically imposing to students. But classroom management, I haven't necessarily had those kind of issues in terms of like discipline and those kind of things. And at our school at SAMI, we don't have as many problems with that anyway. But when I taught middle school, there were times where if I was a smaller teacher, I would have felt unsafe. If I was a new teacher coming to that environment, like I think that would have been intimidating for me and I might have reacted in a poor way. And so classroom management is like kind of a weak point of mine because I haven't had to use it as much. And a strength of mine, I think, is finding something interesting for students to work on or for them to produce or for them to share with their classmates that they really genuinely care about, because I hope that my students can tell that I am genuinely curious about the ideas that we're talking about. And so I think that's my strength, is finding something in there that is interesting or intriguing from a bunch of different angles. And then understanding that different students have different interests. And so I almost always have assignments, like especially at the end of a unit or a summative, that are allowing students to choose a topic that they want to learn more about, either because they're passionate about it or because it's new to them and they want to learn more about it. And the idea of students just repeating back to me things that I've already told them isn't really appealing to me. And so along those lines, some of my weaknesses also are like just doing like, kind of those baseline rote memorization or vocabulary or like those. So I try and intentionally work on those, but I think some of those skills where it's more about like, learn this material, take a quiz, which is necessary sometimes. But I really try and make things more engaging to what they're interested in the best I can.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks.
I like the idea of keeping things interesting, and like, forgive me if I'm stereotyping, right? But you don't teach like I shouldn't even say it this way. I'm gonna say it this way. We'll get in trouble later. But you don't teach like a stagnant or a dead subject, right? Like the idea of civics is that it's ever evolving. Yeah. Right. We're always in session. We're always voting on something new. Right. And like, it's core to who we are as people, as a society, right? Like, and so I'm wondering, how do you keep things, fresh for students, and create the nexus between like the reason why you need to learn this is because like it has an actual impact on your life.
Yeah, I think I don't really need to give that lesson anymore because, we saw, the last couple of years we've been impacted by societal problems in such tangible ways, and that we physically weren't in the buildings, that students can immediately see that, we want to have people in positions of power that are going to make decisions that impact us in positive ways, or at least mitigate the negative impacts of a pandemic, for instance. And so I think the impetus, the reason, I think is more just implied, and the students have that knowledge. However, the other side of that is because they've been inundated with so much political language, or they've been so impacted by societal issues. I've seen a lot of students like shut down in terms of like, I don't really do politics, and I don't really, I kind of ignore that, or if something comes up on my feed that's related to that, I kind of exit out of it, or I don't really want to know about it. And so, or maybe they don't want to talk about it in school because their opinion is different than a lot of their classmates. And so, navigating that a little bit and helping them to see that these things do impact us on a regular basis. But also now I'm more cognizant. I used to just throw as much information as possible at the students and be like, here's this issue, and like maybe accompanying like tragedies that are happening around the country or around our region. And I'm much more cognizant of that because of students' mental health and because of their emotional health and their social well-being. Understanding that like we will talk about those issues, but I'm not just going to be like, we're starting the day with a tragedy, here we go. I'm just more aware of that. Like before, I used to use a lot of those things, kind of like the media does, to try and get your attention and be like, here was this incident and this many people died, and if this would have happened, then this wouldn't have happened, and those kind of things, and just trying to get the students to understand that their actions have an impact, or politicians' actions have impacts. But I've kind of toned that down a little bit. I'm coming back to it during COVID, teaching online, or when we came back at first. I was a little bit unsure because I myself was consuming less political news than I had previously. I used to consider it part of my job to stay as politically informed, reading an hour of news every day or watching whatever was going on. And I've scaled that back for myself personally. And I had conversations with students at that time about what is a healthy amount of consumption of those kind of things for you. Not for all students, but like for you, is it 15 minutes? Is it every Sunday you look at the news of the week, or what is it? And those have been interesting conversations with the students, and a lot of them have insights into it that surprised me, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Man, Duncan, please don't take this the wrong way, but like, you're such a well-rounded person.
Thanks.
Right? Like,
Thanks.
We talked about you as an athlete, we've talked about you as a civics teacher, and then also like the compassionate side of understanding, like even though this is important for us to understand, like I value students' mental health. And I think in my head, right, like, don't let me be a fan of yours, right, like, how valuable that would be in someone who's a mentor.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in, right, like, we've talked about you beforehand, we've talked about you as civics teacher. I'm interested in, like, what is your philosophy and how you show up, and really, like, the essential element of mentoring students and being in relationship with them. How do you go about that? What's that practice look like?
Yeah, there's a lot of steps. And some are more like written out, and some are more just maybe little things I've learned along the way. But to me, our school, we really believe in like relationships, and that is emphasized through mentor group. And so I wholeheartedly believe in that, and that extends also to my classroom. We have a relatively small school. I've taught a lot of my students that I have in 12th grade civics. I taught them in history as 9th or 10th graders. Some of those were online, so I don't really know them as well because they didn't turn their cameras on. But anyways, I always have to bring that up. But the mentorship piece, I have a million different strategies, and sometimes it's just to see what sticks. Getting to know the 9th graders and having a plan for them to be integrated into a community that already exists, but that also wants them to exist as a part of it, is a negotiation that we have every year. And so I think for me, I'm honest with my students about what I'm trying to do. So like at the start of this year, we have a very strong culture for our upperclassmen. And so we I guess 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And I had to pull them aside after the 9th graders. I excused them from mentor group and say, like, these first couple of weeks, mentor group is about the 9th graders. Like, and I communicate that to them. I'm not just trying to secretly do that. I tell that straight up to the students, and I say, you guys, I know it's fun for you guys to be back, and it's fun for you guys know each other really well, but like, if the volume in here is so loud and you guys are shouting inside jokes at each other across the room, and some of them are like things that people wouldn't normally say to each other, and then like the 9th graders are just sitting there like, what is this group? Like, we're not going to be able to get to where we need to go in terms of as a whole community. And so I just have honest conversations with the students, and I empower them to be leaders, to say, what am I going to do to make this a better environment for everybody? And then just every day being there and showing up. And so I think for me as a teacher, I don't miss class. Like, I don't miss school very much. I have a son now, and so I kind of have to miss when he's sick sometimes. But like, I don't miss class because I want the students to be able to rely on me, and they always know I'm there, even if they don't need me for something in that instance. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but there's just so many different things that I do in terms of being a mentor, and some of them are like lesson plans, and the ones that have worked in the past, but a lot of them are just like little conversations I have with the students all the time to check in how they're doing, or emails I send to other teachers to say, like, this student doesn't seem to be doing so well in your class, what can I do to help? Or like, there's just a bunch of different things that you just learn as you keep mentoring over time, that these are necessary in order to support the students. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did answer my question.
Okay, all right, good, okay. Yeah, I tried.
And I love that idea, right, about like, because I know one of our main focuses here is this idea of engaging the community. And I think sometimes we think of the community as external, right? And I love the idea that, like, if we have to pause, if we have to wait, if we have to move, if we have to adjust, like my tagline, the thing that I try to live by in my life, right, is I'm somebody who wants community to work for everybody. And I love the idea that you implement that into your mentor group. Right? If there has to be a pause, if there has to be a wait, like, it's about all of us. And sometimes the focus has to be on those who have the most amount of need in this moment.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm wondering if, there's what might be your favorite story that's come out of your time as a mentor here?
Yeah, right. I have a lot. I think I told you a story before, but now I'm not remembering what that one was, because they just come and go so much. I think for me, the stories that are most powerful for me is that every year the seniors tend to kind of take over the mentor group, and usually I've been lucky. I've had a lot of really good student leaders that are seniors, that are leaders outside of the mentor group and inside of the mentor group. But kind of every year you have this moment where either a student or a class of students, you can see them kind of take on the mantle of whatever grade that they're in. And usually it's the juniors or the seniors, but you see that they suddenly look around and they're like, oh wait, I'm the oldest person here. Or I'm the person here who knows the most about this club. Or I'm the person that knows the most about working, like having a job and talking to other people about, or applying for college. And so seeing that moment of realization in students when they're like realizing that they have the power to impact other people that are in their immediate vicinity, just like previous students have done to them. I think that's like, those are the most powerful moments. And I can think of moments for all of those students that have stepped into that role. I think about like at our all-school picnic at the end of the school year last year, one of my juniors, just like we were sitting, we'd all eaten, everyone had gotten enough food, people were off doing kickball or whatever else we're doing for the all-school picnic. And we just kind of had a conversation about what is next year going to look like. And it was a conversation I would have with a friend, with an adult, with somebody I'm working on something that we both really care about. And so that student just outlined like, hey, it seems like this person doesn't feel that much of a part of the mentor group. And then I would be like, yeah, but they brought all these treats for everybody, and so it seems like they want to be a part of it, but we need to work on bringing those people in more. And so I think just almost like strategizing about how are we going to build this community, and being transparent that this is a community that we have to build and we have to maintain. And if people are missing class, or if people are showing up late, or if people aren't following through on things that they're going to say to do, like, how do we hold those people accountable? And it's not just me holding them accountable, because that's like a very top-down approach, and it's not really sustainable in the long term. And so I've been lucky, it's like all the student leadership really that sticks out to me, And then, like, to me, there's all just the funny moments. Like, when I can think back of every class, I kind of think of my mentor group in terms of the students that they came in with and then they graduated with. And there's just so many hilarious moments, or like just inside jokes, or like there's this game Blockus. You ever played Blockus? It's like
I don't believe I have.
It's this really simple game, but it's essentially like 4-person Tetris. You're all trying to get your pieces down there. So I introduced it to the students, and they loved playing it, and they would talk so much trash to each other. And I had one student in my mentor group, and when I did senior breakfast, and we talk about all of our students, I said I invented a new love language, and I was like, this student, their love language is trash talk, like, and it's true. Like, their dream of a mentor group would be them versus 10 other people, them yelling, the 10 people yelling at them and them yelling back at them about anything. It could be about the best type of chips. It doesn't matter. And like, they just wanted to get people fired up, and that was like how they got engaged with people, and it was hilarious. And so that was one of the students who would play Blockus, and they would talk so much trash with each other. And then I played this game for years, and so I played and just completely dominated them. And so then I wouldn't play with them again, and just became this ongoing thing of them wanting to play Blockus with me. And then I would be like, I'll only play if you guys, if everyone's playing, or if you guys are doing stuff. So just ongoing games that we play and that kind of stuff that just builds camaraderie and community and that kind of stuff. That's another good memory, I guess, yeah.
I'm like drawing the connection, right? Like, one of our other main focuses is the idea of like building on your strengths, right? Yeah. And I'm curious about that student, right? Because I think about your balance now between, mentor group and civics, right? And like, I feel like part of civics is like, how do we make rhetorical arguments for folks? And I'm like, oh man, I bet you that student is the one.
Yeah, and that student argued with me too. I taught a class, we did a history class where we would do like really focus on one particular topic. And instead of doing like, very superficial coverage of like U.S. history from 1776 to today, like we would really dive into, Reconstruction era or the Civil War. Like, I did a class on 1968, and this student argued with me for the whole semester that like, you can't teach a whole class about 1968. And even though he was enjoying the class, and he would say to me, he's like, if you were going to choose a year, that's a good year to choose. But you can't do that. Like, you got to cover more things, so like, I don't know, it was just fun stuff like that. And I just have those fond memories of individual students, or there's a lot. I guess with each student, I probably have a couple of, attached memories of, all the fun things that we went through, and just the ongoing relationship. I mean, it's a long time, 4 years to know somebody and really get to know them and their ups and downs. It's a long time. So, yeah.
So, Duncan, I've been trying to explain to folks who work at SAMI, SOTA, or IDEA that mentor group is not normal. Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't happen everywhere. And as I think about this, like, what is, and you've talked a lot to it, but if there's an answer that you might, like, what is the benefit to building relationship with students outside of instruction time that changes the way the instruction time goes?
Yeah, it's a two-way street. I guess I'll start with mine, because the students is, I think, bigger, but before I forget. So for me, the benefit for me as someone who cares about our school and about our community is like, that's how I take a temperature of how the students are doing. So if there's an issue going on at our school, I ask my mentor group about it. And I'll say, well, is this something you guys are experiencing? Is this something we need to do something about? And so for me, it's a survey of the school, and it's not a perfect survey because they're all in the same mentor group, but like, it's different grade levels, it's different, students have different interests, those kind of things. And so for me, I get a lot out of it, because sometimes I'm wondering, I'm like, are you guys being negatively impacted by, X, Y, or Z, whatever it is, or is this something that you guys are doing and it's being helpful for you? And so that's a really helpful communication tool for me. For the students, what it provides to them, I think that the built-in group, knowing that there's people that they can go to and be a part of on a consistent basis through all sorts of different things, whether it's like administrative stuff, working like study hall academic classes, just doing fun things, doing all school activities, it becomes a family for them. And I've seen it happen with many, many students, and so I know that it works. I know that that unit really does get created. And even in my first year here, I had a great senior class, which I was really lucky for, because if you're coming in as a new teacher, it's really hard to respect the old community and the culture that they have, and then to try and build your own that is an extension of who you are. And so that's a really big challenge. And my seniors, when I first came in, totally took it on. They were like, you're our mentor teacher. We have a great culture. We're going to make this happen. And they were awesome, just like so awesome. And all the other students were too, but especially the seniors. And so I'm always thankful for them because we still have that same culture today. Like that, you can see the through lines of the way that we treat each other in mentor group until today. And at senior breakfast, when we talk about all of our seniors in our mentor group, I said to this group, I said, I don't know if you guys are best friends outside of mentor group, but I really appreciated the friendship that you guys had within the mentor group because I knew they were in different cliques, like outside of mentor group. And they like stopped me and they were like, no, we love each other. Like we are each other's best friends. Like we do really look out for each other outside of that. Some of them really do hang out outside of mentor group. And so I remember that because I was like, I essentially told I was wrong. I was trying to respect the fact that, they'd have other groups of friends and that kind of stuff. But they were like really adamant. They're like, no, these are our closest friends and we've shared that bond and created that. And you just don't get that at other high schools. I mean, I always felt like advisory class was a missed opportunity at other schools. And missed opportunity not just by the teachers or by the students or by just the whole, no one was quite in on it enough for it to be meaningful. And I'm not saying other schools should necessarily do what we have. Ours is pretty robust. But I always felt like, advisory class, that could be a really cool opportunity for you to be in a school setting and talk about issues that are impacting you, but not really focused on one particular academic subject. And so I think it's really cool to have it here and to see how it plays out just on a weekly basis and how we get to touch base with people and see how they're doing and experience high school through the eyes of other people. I mean, it's a lesson in empathy every single time someone else is going through something and you see how it impacts them differently. We have people have family members that pass away and we talk about it in mentor group if they want to bring it up, or people they get sick and they miss a whole month of school and you see how that impacts them for that whole semester and they may be going into the next semester. And so those kind of experiences that we don't all necessarily experience in high school, but we will experience at some point in our life, they get to experience that along with their mentees. So it's pretty cool for that. Yeah.
And there's two more questions.
Yeah.
Right, and I love the conversation that we've had up until this point. And one of my favorite things is to try to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. And so from what I've gathered thus far, right, is that you've loved the experience of being in school. Mm-hmm. I asked you why you love that experience, and you said it was because of the teachers and the people who were present in the community that they've created, right? And then now in your answer of mentor group, I'm understanding you creating the same type of community.
Trying, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Trying, succeeding.
Yeah.
We'll leave that up to the students.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
But trying to do the same thing. And so I'm curious, we're now talking about almost tertiary inspiration at this point, third level, third wall, right? What's your hope for students as they exit SAMI and how they'll impact the community?
Yeah, I think that's one area that as a mentor I haven't been able to figure out how to navigate exactly because I hear their experiences that we're so close. We see each other all the time, and students come back, and I see them, and it's great to see them come back. But I'm also I have boundaries, with students and those kind of things, and I want them to be able to live their lives. And not feel like I'm, looking over their shoulders still, hey, are you doing this thing? And so I'm aware of that. But there are certain students, especially that I wish that I did maintain more connection with. And so I think I'm still navigating that as a mentor teacher. Is there are students that I think would continue to benefit from mentorship, but how to navigate that from a high school teacher with high school students. And they know I love them and I care about them, and I tell them that. And I do. But then when you enter into now are we gonna you're gonna come to a family gathering of mine? And those kind of things are probably not. So it's those things are tough, but I really do care about them that much. And I talk to my family about my mentees all the time. And so they know, when something's going on with one of them, I talk to my partner about it, or I talk to my family, and so they know all the issues that they're facing, or they know the successes that they're having, or when I have students that are accomplished outside of school, whether they're doing music or sports, and I go and see their performances, and those guys, I love bragging about those students to my families. And so I think I am good at navigating how to appreciate what they do outside of school while they're in high school. But in terms of navigating their future, I think this is maybe a flaw just in high school in general. We just feel okay, we got you guys to where you wanted to be. We got you into this college or into this program or into this living situation, and we helped you get there. And now you're on your own because we have another group of students that we need to work with and those kind of things. And so it makes me a little bit sad to think about, to be honest, because I wish I maintained connection with those students. But then I've also had students come back into the mentor group after they leave. And it's a weird dynamic because they know the older students so well, and then they don't know the younger students. And so it's a little bit alienating for those younger students to have, people coming back. And obviously you don't want someone coming back like every week or whatever, like they don't go to school here, so it's like a different, so those kind of things too, like boundaries and that kind of stuff. So, but the biggest thing is them being able to see students in front of them go on and navigate what they're going to do after high school. The students learn so much from them because oftentimes you will have some student that is above you and a couple years ahead of you that has some similar path to you, whether they're going to a four-year private institution or a public university or TCC or wherever they're going. You usually have someone that is following a similar path and that they can learn from those people, from direct or indirect, conversations about it. So I think that's the biggest strength is the students learning from each other and working through it with that.
Man, how awesome that there gets to be space provider for that.
Yeah.
No, I'm stuck on this idea that mentor group is not normal. Like that
totally,
it should be, right?
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah, it's a risk.
Yeah.
It's a risk. I mean, it takes adults coming into a workplace, and if people are used to teaching in a classroom this way and teaching the same thing, to students, and they're a little cookie cutter-ish, and there's a lot of really good teachers who do a really good job with that, that I don't think would like the kind of the structure of, well, you build the community and what it is, and for mentor group. And so it's not for everybody. So yeah, it's a tough balance to know to what extent every school should be doing something like it. The other thing that happens is if you're a mentor, I've been a mentor for 7 years now, and so I have those same kids. But if you have a close relationship with those kids, and then you take a job somewhere else, or you leave teaching, or whatever you're doing, those kids are heartbroken, And so that's another consideration. Not that we shouldn't stop loving people because there's a chance that we might get our hearts broken, but because I can see why people don't do it. I mean, we live in the world of people switch jobs all the time. I mean, my friends who work in the private sector, they switch jobs multiple times a year, and it's not a big deal. I can't even keep up with where they're working and those kind of things. But teachers, we often work at the same place for a long time. And so sometimes I feel like we're pushing back against the culture of I'm always updating my resume, and I'm always doing these things. And mentor group is one of those reasons why I see my longevity here, things just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so that's tough. That's tough. The students, I think the students are advised when they get into the workplace to leverage every job opportunity and try and get an offer from here to move to here, and that's not really how teachers operate. But it does, that culture I think leads to less continuity, and then the mentor group suffers because they have multiple mentor teachers instead of just the same one over years. Yeah.
I appreciate the beauty and difficulty in what you're describing. And as we talk about the last question, I think that's the perfect balance to approach it with, right? Because we're as much as we like to pretend that we have things figured out, right? Especially as a teacher, right? That's a habit.
Yeah.
No, I got it. I'm curious about, and you can take this either way, right? We ask this question both in an ethereal fashion and in a really practical fashion. We're always trying to get to the ideal, whether that be the state of public education or self in our regular practice. And I think three things that we consistently have to ask ourselves is what is something that we need to start doing as a new habit? What is something that we have to stop doing, or a habit that we have to get rid of? And what's something that we have to continue to do and or amplify, right? To really get to a place of, what I mean? Really having this land. So maybe if we start with the start question.
Yeah. I think something we need to start doing is when we have new mentor teachers and we have new mentor groups, essentially they're new mentor groups because they're, all the freshmen are new and then the new teachers. I think trying to find a way to integrate their experience into the broader community. I felt really bad about this last year during COVID. It was still COVID, but during, when we were much more strict with, our classes and moving between classes, and we had new teachers, and I didn't really do mentor group activities with new mentors because I was like, well, we need to keep our exposure down. And so I think there are some teachers that would have benefited from, oh, let's do a circle all together, or let's go do a fun activity, or we'll do academic advising all together, and I can kind of show you how I do it, and we can do it that way. And so I think just integrating new teachers, because it is such a unique experience, and some parts of it come really naturally, and other ones you really have to work on. I think the only way you can learn is by doing, and then when in those cases, then you probably need to see someone else do it and see how they do it. And they're not going to do it exactly the same as me, and nor should they, but they are going to at least see an example of how those things work. And so I think mentor teachers that are experienced helping those new ones is something that I would like to do more. And I felt like I did do it more before COVID, but I kind of got out of that habit a little bit with that. So yeah, that would be one. For the, what do we need to stop doing? That one's tough. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and even if it comes to you personally, right? Like I think early on in like my teaching career, I really wanted to be students' friends. I wanted them to like me, and ultimately, like, that's not what this relationship is about.
Yeah.
And a mentoring relationship is not just, right, like, it's fun and it's happy all the time. Like, sometimes there are corrections, change, pivots that we have to make. And so one of the things I had to stop doing, right, was letting it be about friendship as opposed to mentorship.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, right, if there's anything in your practice that, you've had to put down, that you've had to stop doing.
Yeah. I think I always came in, my students joked that I was a dad before I was a dad. And so, so there's that part of it. But I think for me, I appreciate you asking that question, because it definitely triggered something for me, which was I need to stop assuming that this group of students is the same as a previous group of students. So learning from the past, but still in the past when I've allowed students to take on something as a leadership role and say, you're going to plan this event that we're doing, or you're going to plan a field trip, or whatever we're doing, and it doesn't go well, to then assume that it's not going to go well in the future. And so I guess it's stop being pessimistic, or stop being maybe a little fatalist, that like, this is just the way that, juniors are. This is just the way that students are, just the way that SAMI students are, whatever it is, just kind of putting that down. And usually it's not focused on individual students. Usually it's more like on the collective, like, oh, we can't do that. And so it's kind of having like a deficit mind, and it's a balance back and forth. And so that would be one for me, is allowing a new group to try something that in the past I thought would work and didn't, and giving them a chance to do it. Because I think potentially the outcome could be really cool and really beautiful. So that's one. And then I guess continue doing, for me, is just continuing to remind myself that the students all need different mentorship every single day. And the students in the class will never know how many different things you are balancing in your mind that different students need. As the week goes on, I make a list of things. So like a teacher emailed me about this student about a particular assignment. I need to talk to that student, or a parent emailed me, or I checked on attendance. The student has been out for a week because they've been sick, or they didn't come to my class. They were out sick or whatever. And so all of those little things that are happening, just remembering that every single one of those matters, and that the students, they're having their own individual experience all the time. And that many times, if it seems like they're frustrated with me, they're probably frustrated with something else. And it manifests towards me, but it really isn't about me for that. And that I just have to always remind myself is how kind and how understanding and how just open and honest and caring my students have been over the years. And so not to get a little bit pessimistic. And I think for me, that comes from, I'm not pessimistic about my students. I'm more pessimistic about the world right now in the last 3 years or last couple of years. Just about the way people treat other people. And I'm a politics, civics teacher. I could talk about politics issues, but I think about just interactions I have with people all the time, where I just think, I feel like that would have gone differently a couple years ago. I feel like that person wouldn't have been so standoffish, or maybe I present myself differently or something, or maybe I'm just tired because I'm a new parent and so it's like I don't have the energy for it. So I don't know what it is, but my overall pessimism for interacting with people has definitely increased. There's definitely my optimism has taken a hit, and to not let that impact my students and how I interact with them, I think is something I need to keep doing every single day, and not understanding that people are going through a lot all the time, and especially right now, but that we can still treat each other well, and we can still be the best versions of ourselves that we can be on that given day. So, yeah.
And I really appreciate the authenticity of your answer.
Thanks.
Right. I know we were having the dance earlier of like, oh man, you know, I consume so much.
Oh yeah,
This idea of political platitudes, right? But I really feel like I'm grateful that we spent the time. I really feel
of course.
like
I love sharing
to know a little bit about you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, one, for the things that you do for students, for continuing to be consistent in mentor group, and I hope that lasts for a long time as you're talking about people switching positions.
Yeah.
But also, like, thank you for taking the time today. Grateful, glad we got a chance to speak to each other, that I got to know more about you, and really excited for the experiences that students get to have because you're here.
Yeah,
so appreciate you.
I think about mentor group all the time, so it's nice to talk about it and share how I feel about it and how much I love those students. So, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. All right.
Elements of Education is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Tacoma, Washington. We're dedicated to changing public education to better serve the diverse needs of students by focusing on our core values of empathy, community, balance, and thinking. For more information about the work that we do, please visit elementsofed.org, or you can follow us on Instagram at Elements of Education.